Grandma, please don't smile. Just look under the table.
What are you talking about, baby?
Dad doesn't not saw it. No, was that?
Saw what?
The chandelier light shimmered against crystal glasses, scattering gold across the white linen tablecloth like a blessing. Laughter rolled through the room in warm waves. Someone adjusted a phone for a better angle. Someone else called out, "Smile." Grandma, she did. She always did. 75 years of resilience sat gently on her shoulders that night. A woman who had crossed oceans with 2 suitcases and a stubborn belief that dignity could build a future. A woman who stitched clothes at midnight, who learned a new language by listening at bus stops, who raised a son to believe he belonged in rooms that once would have closed their doors to him. Tonight was supposed to honor her. Flowers lined the table. A banner read, "Family is everything." The room hummed with admiration. Then she felt a small hand tug at her sleeve. Her grandson leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Grandma, look under the table." At first she smiled, thinking it was a child's game, but something in his voice, not playful, not mischievous, made her pause. Her smile held in place a second too long. The laughter around her seemed to stretch, distort, slow. Forks clinked against plates in distant echoes. Across the table her son stood tall, adjusting his tailored jacket, preparing to raise a glass. She lowered her gaze. Slowly, carefully, she bent down. What she saw made her blood turn cold. Tucked against the inner frame of the table was a leather folder, thick and deliberate. Its edges were crisp. A bold header stamped across the top in unforgiving letters. Beneath it, multiple pages marked with tabs. Signature lines waiting patiently, waiting for her. This did not belong at a birthday dinner. Her fingers hovered but did not touch. Her heart pounded in a rhythm she had not felt in years, not since the early days when bills stacked higher than hope, not since she learned that survival sometimes wears a polite smile. She straightened slowly, composing her face before anyone noticed the crack. Across the table, his son lifted his glass. "To the woman who taught me everything about family," he began, voice smooth, practiced. "To the woman who showed me what integrity looks like." Applause erupted instantly. Phones rose higher. The livestream chat flooded with hearts and clapping emojis. Comments scrolled faster than she could read. What a beautiful family. Such a devoted son. This is what real values look like. He smiled modestly, nodding as though humility were stitched into his suit. But she knew the weight of performance. She had ironed that very suit. She had seen the rehearsals, the mirror speeches, the calculated pauses. He was building something bigger than a career tonight. He was building a narrative, and under the table, hidden from every camera angle, was the truth. Her grandson's hand slipped into hers beneath the linen cloth. It trembled slightly. She squeezed back, steadied up above the table. He spoke about honor, about protecting elders, about preserving legacy. His words drew cheers, donors, and the room exchanged impressed glances. Influencers zoomed in for close dash-ups below the table. A different story waited to be signed. She lifted her eyes and looked at her son, really looked at him. The confidence, the charm, the certainty that she would play her part in that moment. The celebration no longer felt like a birthday, it felt like a stage. And what she discovered under that table would not just fracture a family, it would expose a lie that thousands had already believed. Before the applause, before the whisper, before the folder pressed against polished wood like a quiet threat, there was the image. He had built it carefully in town halls. He spoke about integrity as if he had invented the word. He talked about elders with reverence, about how a nation could be judged by how it treated its grandparents. He quoted her sacrifices in interviews. He told reporters that everything he knew about strength came from watching his mother survive in a country that once doubted her accent and her name. Clips of him hugging seniors went viral. He leaned down to listen. He held their hands. He promised protection, stability, dignity. Commentators called him refreshing, a bridge between generations, proof that family values still meant something. And every time the camera zoomed in, he made sure she was somewhere in the frame. But the private moments told a quieter story. "Mom, you don't need to worry about these things anymore. I'll handle everything." He said it gently the first time, almost lovingly. A son stepping into responsibility. She had nodded. After decades of carrying the weight alone, the idea of rest sounded like mercy. Then the conversations became more frequent. "Just sign here. It's for convenience. It's temporary. You trust me, don't you?" He began reviewing her mail before she could open it, redirecting calls, suggesting new financial advisors who spoke more to him than to her. He framed every shift as protection. You worked too hard to be stressed at this age, and she believed him because she remembered the little boy who once clung to her coat in unfamiliar streets, the teenager who promised he would make her proud, the young man who cried the day he got his first internship and said, "We did it, Mom." Trust, once built through struggle, does not unravel easily, but tonight, beneath the table, the unraveling had shape. A folder was no ceremonial keepsake. The pages were not symbolic gestures. The language was precise, legal. Final. Property, transfer forms, her house. Her savings, her name carefully placed above signature. Lines dated for this evening, scheduled, prepared, timed. Above the table. He lifted his glass higher, thanking her for teaching him sacrifice. Below the table, sacrifice was being redefined. Earlier that week, she had overheard fragments of tension in his voice through a half-closed door. We can't delay this. With the donors expect stability needs to be finalized before the announcement. She hadn't thought it was about her. Why would she? But her grandson had heard more. He had been sitting on the staircase, small hands wrapped around the railing, listening as his father's voice sharpened in a way it never did on stage. He didn't understand legal jargon. He didn't grasp set structures or campaign optics. He understood tone. He understood urgency. He understood that something about the way his father said she signed. She has too. Didn't feel like love. Children recognize shifts. Adults pretend not to see. So when he spotted the folder being slid discreetly under the table before guests arrived, when he saw his father's eyes flick down to it during the toast, he felt the wrongness settle in his chest, and he chose a side. Back at the table, applause thundered again. She felt heat rise behind her eyes, not from anger but from humiliation. Had she been naive? Had her trust become leveraged? The thought that strangers in this room might soon believe she had willingly handed over everything for a symbolic gesture tightened her throat's. Denial tried to comfort her. Maybe it's routine. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe you meant well. But the dates were real. The clauses were clear. Immediate transfer upon signature. He wasn't forcing her, he was orchestrating her. There is a difference. He had calculated the setting. Her birthday surrounded by supporters, cameras broadcasting to thousands. Public affection as pressure. Applause as expectation. Above the table, he spoke about legacy. Below the table, he prepared to inherit it early. Her grandson's small fingers curled into her palm again, as if anchoring her to the present. He wasn't violent. He wasn't cruel in obvious ways. He was polished, strategic. A man who understood that control delivered with a smile rarely looks like control at all. And that was what frightened her most. The room cheered as he concluded his toast. Someone shouted, "Speech. Speech from Mom." He grinned, already reaching toward the hidden folder with his foot, nudging it slightly closer to her chair. Everything was aligned. The narrative, the optics, the pen waiting in his jacket pocket. But the real betrayal wasn't just the papers. It was the timing. Because tonight, cameras were rolling. She straightened slowly, the folder's weight still pressing against her thoughts like a second heartbeat. Across the table, her son lifted, his glass higher, his smile widening for the cameras. "To the woman who taught me everything about honor." The word lingered in the air. Honor. It echoed differently now. She scanned the room with new eyes. The influencers seated near the front, phones angled perfectly to capture emotion. The local press pretending to enjoy dessert while monitoring engagement metrics. The donors at the far end of the table, assessing not just the speech but the brand. Supporters nodding with rehearsed admiration. This wasn't just a birthday, it was a rollout. A soft launch disguised as sentiment. A campaign wrapped in candles and frosting. Every detail, curated, every angle intentional. Under the table, her grandson's hand tightened around hers. His grip was small but fierce, as if he understood that this moment was larger than both of them inside her. Something shifted, not anger. Clarity. She moved carefully, her expression serene. While applause rippled again, she slid the edge of one document from the folder and folded it neatly into a purse. The motion was subtle, invisible to anyone not looking directly at her hands. She had spent a lifetime learning how to survive rooms where she was underestimated. Now she used that skill. When she unfolded the page beneath the tablecloth, her eyes moved quickly across the language. Legal phrasing, structured clauses, clean, efficient sentences. Then she saw it: immediate transfer upon signature. No grace. Period. No shared authority. Final. Her breath caught. A memory surfaced uninvited. Glossy brochures left casually on her kitchen counter. Just weeks earlier, just options, Mom, for later. You deserve comfort. Photos of manicured lawns, neutral-toned room, smiling seniors playing cards beneath staged sunlight. She had laughed it off then. "I'm not going anywhere," she had said. He had smiled back. Too quickly. Above the table, livestream comments streamed faster. "Such a beautiful family. He's the kind of leader we need. Protect our elders." The irony burned. Her son reached into his jacket and withdrew a sleek pen, metallic and heavy, engraved with his campaign slogan. He tapped it lightly against his glass for attention. "Charming. As ever, Mom," he said warmly, leaning closer so the cameras could capture intimacy. "Remember those forms we discussed? Might as well sign them while everyone's here. Symbolic, right? A celebration of legacy." A ripple of polite laughter passed through the room. Inside her, a different sound echoed. This is not symbolic. This is strategy. Gasps did not leave her lips, but they moved through her chest like a storm pressing against closed windows. She felt the pressure of expectation gathering. Do it. Smile. Play your part. He wasn't demanding, he was inviting. That was the genius of it. He counted on her compliance, on her lifelong instinct to protect him from embarrassment, on the cultural reflex it told her family matters stayed inside the family, on the belief that a mother's role was sacrifice, even when sacrifice turned into surrender. He counted on her silence. He counted on optics. She lifted her eyes and met his. "Why tonight?" she asked gently. It was not accusation. It was curiosity sharpened into a blade. The room shifted just slightly. He blinked, then laughed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, Mondo, make it dramatic. It's just paperwork. And what better night than your birthday? It shows unity." Unity. A few guests exchanged glances. The donors at the far end straightened. The influencers leaned in, sensing unscripted tension. The livestream comments slowed, then surged again. Is something wrong? Why does she look uncomfortable? He felt it too. The subtle tremor and control. He placed the pen in front of her, angled perfectly toward the cameras. Close enough that refusing would be visible, far enough that accepting would look voluntary. Under the table, her grandson leaned closer. "You don't have to," he whispered. For words. No strategy. No optics. Just truth. She looked at him at the unfiltered concern in his eyes and saw the future watching her decision. Not the donors. Not the press him. If she signed, he would learn that love means surrendering your boundaries for applause. If she refused, he would learn that dignity sometimes stands alone. Above the table, her son continued speaking smoothly, filling the silence. "My mother has always trusted me. Haven't you, Mom?" The question landed like a trap. Trust. He wanted the word to bind her, but trust is not blind obedience. Trust is not coercion wrapped in affection. The room grew quieter now. Conversations faded. Borks paused mid-door. Even the live stream seemed to hold its breath. She felt the weight of decades pressing on her shoulders, immigrant nights of exhaustion, years of invisibility, sacrifices that built the very platform he now stood on. She had given him everything once already, but giving is not the same as surrendering. Her fingers moved slowly toward the pen, not to pick it up, to slide it gently away. His soft, almost imperceptible motion. His smile faltered, and what she did next didn't just stop a signature. It flipped the entire room against him. Instead of reaching for the pen, she pushed back her chair. The movement was slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Fabric brushed against fabric. A fork clattered softly against porcelain. Conversations thinned into silence as she rose to her full height, not towering, not dramatic, just steady. Her son's smile froze. For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across his face. She adjusted a shawl with careful hands, then looked toward the small sound system near the cake table. "May I?" she asked, her voice gentle but clear. It was the tone of a woman who had asked for very little in her life. A volunteer handed her the microphone automatically. Still smiling, unaware of the shift about to unfold, the room quieted. Even the air felt different. She turned slowly, taking in the faces around her. Friends, supporters, donors, strangers, who had come to witness a brand of family devotion polished for public consumption. "My son is right about one thing," she began softly. "I did teach him about honor." A ripple of relieved laughter moved through the crowd. He nodded, eager to reclaim footing. "I taught him that when we had nothing, we still had our word. I taught him that dignity does not depend on applause. I taught him that family is not a performance." Her voice did not shake. "I worked nights so he could study in peace. I signed forms I did not fully understand because I believed in his future. I trusted him with my fears, my savings, my sacrifices." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "And I believed that trust was something sacred." Across the room, phones were already lifting again, but this time not for celebration. For documentation. She reached into her purse and withdrew the folded document. The paper made a soft, unmistakable sound as it opened. His jaw tightened. "I also taught him," she continued, "that elders deserve protection, not pressure." A murmur traveled through the guests. Low and uneasy, she lifted the page slightly higher. "This clause," she said calmly, eyes scanning the room rather than fixing on him, "states that upon my signature, all property and financial authority will transfer immediately. Effective tonight." The word "tonight" hung in the air like a bell that had just been struck. Silence. Not the comfortable silence of admiration, but the sharp stillness of recognition. A donor near the back shifted in his seat. An influencer zoomed in closer. Liv's comments, once filled with hearts, began to change. "Wait, what? Is this rewind tonight?" She lowered the page slightly and asked, without raising a voice, without accusation, "Is this what honor looks like?" The question did not attack, it invited reflection. And that made it impossible to dismiss. The power in the room shifted so quickly, it was almost audible. Attention moved from him to her, from performance to principle. Her son stepped forward. Laughter. Brittle. Now, Mom, you're misunderstanding. It's standard planning. We discussed this. She turned her gaze to him fully for the first time. No, she replied evenly. I'm finally understanding. The words were quiet. They landed like thunder. Someone in the front row began recording more intentionally. Another guest whispered, "This is live." A clip was already being shared beyond the room. Fingers moving faster than reputations could react. He reached for the microphone, attempting to soften the narrative. Let's not do this here. This is a family matter. A subtle but powerful line had been crossed because he had chosen the stage. She had chosen the truth. She did not raise her voice. She did not list grievances. She did not shame him. She simply stood there, a woman who had crossed borders, built stability from scarcity, and refused to surrender her autonomy under chandelier light. I am proud of the man my son has become, she said gently, but I will not sign away my voice to prove it. There it was. Dignity under pressure, truth without spectacle. The first clap came hesitantly from somewhere near the back, then another, then several more. Applause built slowly, unevenly, then with conviction. Not because she had embarrassed him, because she had reminded them of something they had almost applauded away. His smile had fully dissolved now. The polish cracked. The confidence that had filled the room just minutes earlier seemed to shrink beneath the weight of public scrutiny. For the first time that night, he looked small. She handed the microphone back without ceremony and returned to her seat beside her grandson. He looked at her as if he were seeing her not just as his grandmother but as a compass. Around them, the room buzzed with recalibration. Conversations shifted tone. Eyes that once admired now assessed. Buddy. Real shock wasn't the applause. It was what happened the next morning. Morning broke with an unusual intensity. The sun rose over familiar streets, but the world seemed to watch differently. Smartphones buzzed across the city. News apps lit up with clips from the night before, showing a grandmother standing firm, pen untouched, a son flustered and exposed. The video trended locally first, then nationally. Shared by thousands who saw more than family drama, they saw courage. Comment sections ignited with debate. How could he pressure his own mother? One read, "She handled that with grace." Another replied. Some still defended him, praising his ambition, calling it a misunderstanding. But the majority questioned, critiqued, and admired her poise. The narrative was shifting fast, relentless, and irreversible. Donors once eager to showcase their proximity began to vanish. Invitations rescinded. Interviews cancelled. Public relations teams scrambled behind closed doors, trying to control a story that was already out of their hands. The optics of the evening carefully planned, it turned against him. At home, the confrontation finally came. Alone, he closed the door and faced her. His voice was sharp, tinged with frustration and humiliation. "Mom, you embarrassed me? You embarrassed us. This isn't how I operate." She looked at him calmly, unshaken. Her eyes, soft yet unwavering, held decades of life lived with integrity. She did not yell. She did not scold. She did not shame him further. "I raised you to lead with integrity," she said slowly, letting the words sink. "I won't help you succeed without it. Power without character is empty. Success without respect is meaningless." The silence that followed was thick. He searched her face for anger, for weakness, for guilt, found none, only resolve. Beside her, the grandson watched quietly. He had seen courage before in stories, but now he witnessed it in real life. His small hand rested atop hers, grounding him as he absorbed the lesson that true strength is measured not by compliance or applause, but by standing firm when it matters most. The papers remained untouched. Her house, her name, her agency, all intact. The campaign's momentum slowed as whispers replaced cheers. But the deeper victory was not in thwarting a political move. It was in reclaiming dignity, in demonstrating that courage does not need fanfare, and that respect earned under pressure resonates far longer than any orchestrated spectacle. Even the community noticed. Neighbors spoke in hushed admiration. Friends texted, screenshots of viral clips attached, captions reading, "This woman reminds us who really holds power." The story of her strength began to ripple outward, far beyond the roof, far beyond the birthday celebration. In the quiet of her home, she sat with her grandson holding his hand, letting the weight of what had happened settle. No grand speeches were necessary now. The lesson had been learned. Integrity was alive, visible, and imitable. Power without character collapses. Image without integrity fades. Dignity doesn't shout, it stands. And on that day, in that household, it did more than stand. It transformed a narrative, redefined a legacy, and reminded a son and the world that some values are not for sale. That night, a grandmother didn't just refuse to sign a document. She signed her name under something far greater.